And welcome to Ridgecrest Talk. Your host, Paul Vander. Tonight we have a guest with us coming from the San Fernando Valley, Robin Pokorski. And Robin is kind of a do-it-yourself, do-everything involved with the gardening communities throughout our state. And Robin was actually up in Kern Valley talking with the gardeners up in Kernville, and has come down to Ridgecrest to talk to us and kind of share some of her information and invite all you folks to get involved. So Robin, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience, tell us a little bit, how did you get involved with gardening?
Oh, I moved here from the East Coast, and I didn't know how to garden in the San Fernando Valley. So that was, I looked up a garden club. I thought that's where I need to go, and I found much more than I thought I'd find.
Right, and one of the first things when I first met you was down at one of these gardening consultant classes that I took, and every area has their differences, and they were talking about how you wanted to take this certain seeds and put them into the freezer for 2 weeks before you plant them, and I thought, what in the world would you want to do that for? And obviously San Fernando Valley is such a Mediterranean climate, you don't have these freezers like we have out here in the desert. And so every area is different, and we have the same thing here in Ridgecrest. When people come to the desert, sometimes they don't even think of gardening. And we do have an active club here. The Oasis Garden Club has been here for 55 years, and we did have a chance for the flower show this last year. Did you get a chance to come out to the flower show?
Yes, I did. I was a judge for it, and it was a spectacular show, probably their best ever.
So, and they do that year in and year out, award-winning for the smaller communities to put together a show. When you only have, 40 members in your group, it can be quite a challenge because you're having, over 100 entries probably at that small of a show even. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? You came out to San Fernando Valley, but what about getting involved with the gardening club? Not just the local club, but it's much bigger than just one community and one club.
My club is Southern California Garden Club, and we meet in Encino. And it's part of California Garden Clubs, which is the largest federation in national garden clubs, which is the largest nonprofit volunteer gardening organization in the world. And it's great to be a part of something so big. And really what got me active at the higher levels of garden club was the gardening study schools. And I found that I learned so much, and I came back with a new appreciation from those schools that I wanted to do that present a school in my area. And then I wanted to be able to share that with other people.
Right, and it's not just here in Ridgecrest or here in Southern California. I went back to North Carolina State this summer for a conference, and there was a botanical garden there on campus, and we went around that botanical garden, and in the building was an Iris Society meeting that they were having a meeting, and as we walked around, different parts of the botanical garden were taken care of by different clubs. And the State Federation for North Carolina actually met there at that botanical garden. So you could see in a snapshot that in these other communities and other locations, the garden clubs are very involved with the community. One of the issues here in Ridgecrest has been civic beautification, is taking care of our parks, taking care of our roads, the medians in the middle. How do we take care of those plants and things like that? Are those typical things that garden clubs throughout the country get involved with beautifying?
Oh, yes, we do. And I know that particularly here in Ridgecrest, you have a lot of Blue Star markers. Blue Star memorial markers honor our veterans, those who have served, are serving, and will serve, and the men and the women. And we're very active out here in this area. And I know that California City, which is, I think, not too far from here.
Right, about 45 miles.
45? Right. They have a lot of civic beautification. And I think that's probably one of the most popular of the programs that all the garden clubs like to participate in.
Right, and Ridgecrest being next to China Lake, the Navy's largest land space facility in the country, has a very dedicated community to the military. I remember we had on the light posts, we have the flags of the different members that are serving. And the Blue Star markers are something that I think a lot of people don't recognize, though. Even though we see those, we have them as far north as going up above Bishop. But here at the fairgrounds, we actually have one right as you come in the front gate. There's a Blue Star marker right there near the flagpole. And so there are Blue Star markers through the highways and byways throughout our communities, but also throughout the country. That's just one program that's supported. You know, there's another program that I think that we can recognize the importance of is the Penny Pines. And this last year, we had one of the fires up near the Kern Valley area that actually blew smoke for most of the day over the Indian Wells Valley. And let's talk about the Penny Pines and what that program does for a minute.
That started in the 40s with Boy Scouts who wanted to collect their pennies and replant our national forests. And the garden clubs embraced this. And now it goes national, as all over the country people are putting their pennies in that jar, usually once a month. And when we collect $68 worth of those pennies and spare change, then that will buy a plantation, which we send to our national forest. And that supposedly buys around 300 seedlings that will be planted at the appropriate time.
Right, so they mail in the $68 and change, and then those 300 seedlings go into an area that needs the reforestation, and they plant that. And we do have a silviculturist or a specialist with the Forest Service here in Kernville who has come into Ridgecrest and given talks. And I think it was 2 months ago, I actually went over to Bakersfield for a garden club there, and they had the silviculturist from up near Fresno who actually drove down and gave them the same talk to show them how they reforest, how they put all those seedlings back in. And that's just a great thing that you just don't see on a day-to-day basis. You don't realize how that works. But another example of a good program. What about, say, with some of our larger spaces like our national parks or things like that? Do we have any programs in that area?
Yes, we do. Anza Borrega Desert State Park has their visitor center has fallen into some disrepair, as there is less funding available for some of these outlying parks. And the garden clubs in California have banded together to replace the irrigation system there. And so we've pledged to raise $15,000 to replace that irrigation system. I'm very proud of that. We're only midway through that. And we also then support the Mission Butterfly Project, Mission Blue Project in San Francisco, and that's led by the Golden Gate Conservancy. And we provide the monies to plant lupin for the Mission Blue Butterfly.
Okay, we're going to go to break. We're going to talk some more about that. This is Ridgecrest Talk with Paul Vender, talking gardening throughout the community. And we're back with Ridgecrest Talk. We're actually have a guest today, Robin Pokorski from the San Fernando Valley, who's come out of the area to Ridgecrest. Actually, I was able to get Robin to come up to Kernville and talk with the community up there. But let's get back to what we were talking about today, which is some of the larger projects. And you were talking about the partnership up in San Francisco area and the certain flowers that are being grown. What is going on with that?
The Mission Blue Butterfly only feeds off of the blue lupin, the silver lupin, and there's another lupin I can't bring to mind. And so the garden clubs, again, banded together because being a part of something bigger, it's exciting, and we've made a difference in the life of that blue butterfly that was working on getting itself extinct, and because it didn't have the lupin, its habitat was being destroyed. So the habitat is now being restored through our monies, and the blue Mission Butterfly is coming back.
Right, and I can just see some people, they kind of look back and they look at these issues as being smaller than, say, how important it is that we build up our city. For example, locally we have a Mojave ground squirrel that has sometimes caused challenges with developing areas. But one of the things to recognize is that this is a private or a group of groups that come together They're not petitioning the federal government to pay for all this, but they're raising the money themselves, identifying their own projects and saying, this is something that we would like to see done. We're going to find a way to fund it ourselves. We're going to go out and get this done. And so throughout the communities, throughout the state, come up with new ideas for projects and things that are identified, and then funding those and getting the change done. And that's something that really, I think all the communities are reviewing and researching. How are we going to fund our parks? How are we going to fund our community? And the garden clubs is one part of that. And one of the things we recognized, it first started when I was up in Kernville at the very small community garden with about 10 families, is we want to grow things. We have the space, we have the garden space, but we don't know how to garden. We need some education. And so I had invited you to come up and talk with them, because through the National Garden Clubs there is an education program. And that, I think, is important, that we need somebody locally who understands the local climate and the local plants, but can also get the education from our experts so that they can become kind of the local educators to work with the community. So what kind of programs does the California Garden Club support for that?
Oh, we have 4 particular disciplines of gardening study, environmental studies, landscape design, and flower show schools. Flower show schools generate flower show judges, and that's who actually judges fairs and designs and specimens, like at your Kern County Fair,
Right.
the Desert Empire Fair.
And part of that is actually the flower arrangements, which is also done by the flower stores. But for example, here in our community, we have people that have done this for a number of years that are very knowledgeable, and they prepare flower arrangements for, say, the Metaringo Museum. When they have a fundraiser, they have a big dinner event. Oftentimes, those nice flower arrangements that you don't think of on the table that really help with that, having that right atmosphere, those are donated hours from our local garden club, the Oasis Garden Club. They come together, they put together maybe 25 of the same arrangement, and they have 25 tables now that have that arrangement. And that's part of the flower show. But when you're talking about a school, let's just say the gardening consultant program, how involved is that? Is that a one day, or how much work is it?
No, it's about 8 days altogether. It's 2 days generally. It's 10 hours of instruction, 4 times. That can be done in a very compressed time frame of a matter of months. It could be spread out over a year or 2 years. And it trains in real basic good gardening practices. Basic botany, propagation, fruit growing, vegetable growing, ornamental growing, and the different kinds of propagation. It's always hands-on. That's a wonderful tool to really get to know your area and the gardening challenges in that area.
Right, and it's really important, because one of the talks we have here is we have different levels of agriculture. We have the small farmer, and we also have the large pistachio grower with 1,600 acres. And regardless, when you look at that, the idea that they had a root fungus, that they had to pull up a lot of those pistachio trees, makes it even that much of a challenge that we want to use the best practices and hopefully not experience that. It's bad enough that we're using our water, but we want to use it efficiently. We want to use the best systems, the best way to do that, and part of that's through education. I don't know if one thing that we did have in the community this last year is John Carlick, who's the extension office in Bakersfield, came over and he gave a class one night a week here at the sponsored by the Water District, that all the local gardeners could come to and get some of that education. And then on another night of the week, he hit California City, actually in Tehachapi. The people would drive up to Tehachapi and had a class there. And so that's an important part of the education, but we don't have master gardeners in Kern County. And that's something that people have been talking about for a few years. If we don't have master gardeners, what's the next level? Well, John Carlick is one of those people that he can talk about a gardening topic at a layman's level and go to a PhD level in about 30 seconds. And he's just got such a wealth of knowledge. And he's the type of person that we can get to come over and teach us. But the component that we need is we need to get the volunteers in the community and working with the community project. And so that gardening consultant school is one of those that I'm actually certified as going down to your club in Southern California, and that's kind of how I got involved with my gardening consultant training. And I think it's real important that if you don't have to stick your plants or your seeds in the freezer, because it's cold enough here. I think we had a 28-degree morning temperature a week or two ago. We know that we don't have the same low overnight temperatures as San Fernando would have, and that's important. Now that class, typically it's 4 classes, 2 days per class, and you can spread that out over once a month or once a quarter for a year.
Yes.
And the community, of course, is always invited to that.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't have to certify. They can just take it just for their own knowledge, similar to the class we had last year. In addition, you have a landscaping class.
Landscape design.
What is landscape design? What does that mean?
That helps the home gardener design his or her own space to use water efficiently. We all have to. That's not going to go away now.
Right. So you're talking about a watering zone with the plants in the same area that need the same amount of water, and also looking at aesthetically what's going to look nice and so forth. So those are 2 of them. We still have a couple more to talk about. We're going to go to break. This is Ridgecrest Talk with Rob and Pokorski. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Ridgecrest Talk. Your host, Paul Vender. We're talking with past president of California Garden Clubs, Robin Pokorski, coming all the way out to Ridgecrest from the San Fernando Valley. And we were talking about some of the education components that we can bring to our communities, the gardening consultant program, the landscaping design. And let's kind of wrap up landscaping design. Is there anything else you wanted to say or that we would want to know? Because that's an area that I haven't studied yet.
Oh, I think that's fascinating. I think that helps the gardener, the home gardener that has an existing landscape but wants to move in a different direction, maybe more drought tolerant. But it also helps a brand new a landscape, maybe an empty palette.
Right, and that's a challenge we have here specifically right now. I just talked to the Water District this week. They're considering offering one of the cash programs like you have more in the Southern California large communities, where they'll pay, say, $1 per square foot to take the grass out of the front yard. But now you have to come up with a design and a plan where you're going to have those right plants in the right water zones where they're going to save water, and it's still going to be aesthetic. Some people think they call it xeriscape, where it's just going to be a cactus in the middle of the yard and it's going to look terrible or something. And that's not really what you learn. You really learn that there's a whole lot involved. And even though I haven't taken the class yet, I went down, I think it's Venice Beach, and walking in the canals and just looking at homes, and you could see ones that had the landscape elements and you could see ones that didn't. And it really, when you look for it, it really made a big difference. And so I think landscape design is something that it would be really great for somebody in the community who wants to get involved, to say, to help our local parks committee or any project, say with a church, anything like that. I remember we had a community garden just went in at the Presbyterian church, and they unveiled those beautiful sign that they're going to put in. And we were talking about, well, you know, as people come out of church, they're going to have this view. And that would be a perfect way to accent that, is to have either a statue right there or your sign right there to tie in the landscaping. And of course the gardening principles as far as growing seeds, and that we've had different guests come in and talk about that. Now a third class you talked about was environmental studies.
That's fascinating. That covers air, water, land, and that is so interesting because it's not just tree huggers. It's not just don't smoke, don't pollute. Of course we know not to pollute. Of course we want to keep our water clean. But we learn so much about the aquifers. And I found that really almost as interesting as gardening study, which was my passion.
Right. And that's a huge issue here in the Valley. We're in an overdraft, and there's huge concerns. The communities as well as the county and the Navy base are all trying to work together to say, what is our community going to be like in 50 years from now? And what steps do we need to take now to get there? And so I think all of us don't want to waste water, but at the same time, we want to have a more beautiful world that we can do that properly. And so environmental studies actually talks about how to use the water, which is a big issue, but also the soil. I mean, here we are with our soil, we're depleting so much of our quality soil. What steps can we take to manage that? And I think that's a big issue locally also. I don't know if you noticed it, when you drove down through Inyokern coming into the valley, there was a big patch of orange fences. Did you see that big patch of orange?
Yes, I did.
And that was a dust mitigation effort that one of our landowners wanted to clear off that land, and he wasn't ready to plant. And so what he had was the wind blowing all that dust into the neighbors, and it became quite a problem. And so everybody that comes in the valley, when they're talking to me, says, do you have any idea what that big orange patch is out in the middle of the desert? And that's one of the efforts they're doing, is putting up some plastic fencing to help so that the dust isn't kicking up in the winds that we get, especially March and April. We're right around the corner. We usually don't, wind is usually a 4-letter word out here in the desert. And so the flower show school is the one I've always steered clear of, because I've heard it's the hardest, and it just really requires you to understand things on many levels. And at the same time, I've gone to a couple of events where they've had demonstrations. One of my favorites is I had cancer. I was coming back from the VA hospital, and I stopped by the Sepulveda Garden Center, and they had a bonsai master from Italy who was giving a demonstration on how he does his bonsai creations.
I'm afraid he'd cringe at you, though, because he'd want you to say bonsai.
Oh, well, see, there you go. I demonstrate that I don't have a lot of experience in that area. But I'll tell you, just sitting there and see those types of talks on areas that are very specialized, it really gives you a greater appreciation. And one of the things about Indian Wells Valley in particular is we have so many people coming here from so many different places, so many backgrounds. It's almost like a club capital of the U.S. if you actually look at all the different groups that we have here. Different, young people say there's nothing to do here, but there really is a lot of different interests that the professionals want to keep in their society, even though they're working hard on the job. They want to come out and play hard too, I guess you could say. So with the flowers program, is that something that you have in every community, or is that something that people travel to?
Most of the time, people will travel to. The last school that was held was in Encino. There's one up in Northern California, and that is sponsored by clubs wherever we're invited. There's always something to learn at Garden Club. I have yet to be at a Garden Club meeting, I think, in my almost 30 years with Garden Club, that I haven't learned something. I can come out here to the desert, and I don't live in the desert, but I can come out here and I will learn something at
Right.
club meetings out here.
And we actually carpooled into town. It was interesting. We had the Yucca brevifolia, what we commonly call here the Joshua tree, but it's in bloom, and that just doesn't happen every year. The conditions, the temperatures, the rain at the right time, everything is in place that when you drive down from Walker's Pass, you can stop there and see those. And even we saw a tortoise, a desert tortoise, right on the side of the road at the 178 and the 14 interchange. Yeah. That's another thing that you just don't see all the time. It's the first time I've seen a tortoise on the side of the road there. But there's so many things to get involved with. We're not just talking about plants, but the plants interact with the animals, they interact with the people, and it's how all of these are brought together to a balance in our communities that's so important.
The interconnectedness of us to our earth, and how important it is that we care for it.
Right, and Robin, I want to thank you for coming in. We're running out of time, but the real key is that I've been hearing from a lot of people that we want to get more education in our communities, and that's what we're trying to do. The Oasis Garden Club is on Facebook, and here in the community they meet at the Desert Empire Fairgrounds, and people can get involved that way, or they can contact California Garden Clubs on the web. We're out of time, but thank you so much for coming. This is Ridgecrest Talk, Paul Vanderwerf. Thank you.